Feast of All Souls. I ran from my tutor. Latin and grammar? No wonder. I ran to the woods where I saw his tracks, this big. In the mud he scratched bottom side the tree. I followed his friant straight to his bed and found it warm. There was a boar in the forest. When I went back, there was my uncle, rod in hand. But he didn't strike. I told him there was a boar in the forest. Why then, we'll go hunting, and as for you, you will hunt like a man or be flogged like a boy. Help kill the boar, and I'll give you the kidneys. Turn tail, and I'll have the skin off your back. That night, I lay and dreamt of the hunt, the underbrush stirring, the snort of the boar, its foul mouth foaming, its tusks like scimitars. Those tusks could slice a man, groin to gorge. But that's not the worst. They say the man who dies from the wound of a boar loses his soul and burns in hell. Dawn came. We mounted. Long before noon, the dogs caught the scent, and the hunt was on. 2 relays of hounds, squealing most sore, the third faint with fatigue. Then it was like my dream. The underbrush stirred, sticks shattered. I saw it, bristling, dark as a devil, huge as a horse, and my bowels turned to water. My uncle dismounted, and I did the same. My legs were like straw, but I walked. One hand forward on the spear and 1 foot ahead. To fall would be death. It charged. My uncle lunged, and I behind him thrust. Felt the spear pierce, braced myself, end to armpit, shoved. It took a long time. The dogs keening and the boar struggling. Blood on the grass, I stood my ground. At last, it was over, and the brute lay still. I almost wept, the joy of it, and the terror. I gasped like a fish and let my head fall back. The green leaves swam in the sky. He kept his word. Right there in the woods, we kindled a fire and butchered the boar. The kidneys were mine, gleaming with fat. Then he clapped my back and called me a man. But dark of the night, sweat in my sleep, I hear that sound, and my spear slips through my hands. I dream I'm back in the woods with that boar.
"9 days it's been since the Maying, and I'm restless yet. Mother hasn't seen it, nor father, nor Robin. Only the horses know. It was May Day, and the others, even father and mother at their age, set off for the woods, wanting bluebells and cowslips and kissing under the trees. I used to go when I was little. I liked to pick flowers and peek. But I'm older now. My friends have sweethearts. There's no one for me, and I know why. I'm too big. Father says his father was a giant of a man, and somehow his size came down to me. There's something else. I've stared into the round pool. The water's never still, but I think I'm ugly. big and ugly and shy in the bargain. Mother says I'll likely not marry at all. It's a world of trouble, you'll save yourself, says mother. Childbearing and child dying. No doubt she's right. I always weep when the hogs are slaughtered. I'm not strong enough to bear and lose. My fine big girl. That's father. He taught me the work of the forge. And even Robin admits there's no one better to quiet a horse. I lay my big hands on them and feel them trembling. I know how they feel. They're like me, big and timid. So I breathe sweet peace to them, not with my lips, but through my fingers. And they hear me, not with their ears, but through their skins. The others went to Mang, and I stayed behind, spinning in the sunshine. The morn was clear as glass, and I was happy as a singing bird. And then he came, leading his horse, and the horse limping, head down, as fine a horse as I've ever seen. A fair gray palfrey, a wondrous horse, but I was gazing at the boy. He had brown hair, not golden like the knights in the story, and his eyes were dark as rivers. The glory was his face, the shape of it. I didn't have the words. He wore a blue cloak, bluer than the sky, and in the clasp was a sprig of white hawthorn. He'd been a Mang, and how I hated her, the girl he might have kissed. I was ashamed to be caught staring. I put my hands on the palfrey, and he gentled as they always do. I ran my hand down the lame leg, picked up the hoof, and saw, caught between hoof and shoe, a stone, a grievous thing. Is the blacksmith in? His voice was like his face, proud and courteous. My palms were sweating. I can ease him. So I led the horse to the forge, and the master followed. I could tell right away he loved his horse. I don't know what he thought, that a maid should know how to shoe a horse. He may have been startled. I daren't look. I set to work, and my hands were steady. All the time I was fishing for something to say, a fine morning, or even, what's your name? But I know who he was. He was Sir Stephen's nephew. Hugo, they call him. He hunts in these woods. He killed a wild boar. I never did speak. I feared if I opened my mouth, he'd know my whole heart. When I finished, I wiped my hands on my apron, and he held out a coin, a farthing. I was sudden bold. I reached out and shoved it away, and touching him is what did it. I felt my face get hot. I could almost hear Robin, Taggett's blushing! Look at Taggett! Taggett's red! I turned and ran back to the house, crouched down with my back to the door, and I hid my face in my hands. I don't know why or for how long. Afterwards, I went back to the forge. He was gone by then, long gone, and it seems a long life. I may live 50 years and never see him again. Not close, not to speak to. There's a good smith up at the castle. Thinking that, I bent my head and saw laying there, on the anvil, that sprig of white hawthorn, on the anvil. If 'twere on the ground, it would only have fallen, but it was on the anvil. I picked it up as if it were holy. I couldn't stop smiling. He left it for me.
My mother died when I was born, so I was suckled by one of the sheep. It has made me, my father says, more sheep than human, which is true. All my life, I've lived with sheep, drunk their milk, eaten their meat, washed their fleece, and carded their wool. Now that I'm older, I help with the lambing. My hands are small, which is good if you have to reach inside a sheep. Jilly's my favorite. She's my sister. The same mother gave us milk. Most sheep don't care, one way or another, but Jilly is sweet of heart. I love the feeling of her chin in the palm of my hand and the smell of her on my fingers. It was last spring that I awakened and knew something was amiss. Jilly, What's wrong? But she only stared with the blank eyes of a beast in pain. I walked behind her, lifted her tail, and saw the head of a dead lamb sticking out between her legs. She'd been struggling to push out that lamb, God knows how long, and I, asleep. I rubbed goose grease on my hands and reached inside. She was bone dry. I knew I hurt her, dragging out that lamb, and she lay on the ground, motionless as death. I called the old shepherd and made him look at her. He said she would die. She's given up, he said. Sheep don't fight. That's why they need shepherds. I started to cry, and old Ralph saw. There's one thing, he said. I wiped my nose with my sleeve. What's that? You might try singing. No one knows why, but sheep fancy music. They do. So all that day and all that night, I stayed by Jill and sang. God restore thee, thou heavenly sheep. Hark to my music and heal in thy sleep. It was really a song for the Virgin Mary, but I changed the words. I sang it over and over until the stars came out. Do not forsake me, my sister, my sheep. Slumber ye gently and heal in thy sleep. I stroked her fleece and felt her chest 1,000 times to see if she was breathing. The moon crossed the sky. There was dew on the grass. The morning star rose, and I sang. Best of all in the flock that I tend, my lamb, my Jilly, my sister, my friend, my lambkin Jilly, thou heavenly sheep, lullaby, lully, and heal in thy sleep. I sang until my voice was hoarse, and I was shivering so hard I couldn't go on. Then I wrapped my arms around Jill, lay down by her side, and slept. I must have slept well, because she got away from me. When I opened my eyes, the sky was full red, and Jill was standing up, cropping her grass.
My father is the noble Lord's physician, and I am bound to carry on that tradition. With every patient my father cures, I learn more medicine. Ordinary wounds heal with comfrey or the white of an egg, and an eel skin takes the cramping from a muscle. I know 5 kinds of fever and 4 humors, the way to search for tumors and bloodletting. I know the stars and the movements of the planets, and with one whiff, I can sniff out dysentery. I am also practicing the way to soothe my patients and to make them pay. They swear at us when we demand our price, but what sort of man can afford to work for free? A healthy man is careless with a bill. You have to make them pay when they're ill. When you see a sick man, you first feel their brow and say, "You should have called me sooner." If given time, I vanquish all your worries. But as it is, we'll have to ask the saints. Make sure you pray and that your heart is silent. And think of ways to simplify your diet. That trencher full of venison right there is much too rich. Just hand it back to me. After the prayer, let the patient rest and tell his family I will do my best to fight this sickness. But I fear for his future. It may be that you've brought him in too late. Then tilt your head and look serious and all-knowing. This sort of talk protects you if he dies. If he recovers, it was all your skill that brought him back to life. And that's better still.
I am a pilgrim to Winifred Well, for St. Winifred Well will heal me. When I come back, I will have no need of the heavy cloak that's been used to conceal me. And though I was born crook-backed, crippled, and ugly, at St. Winifred Well I will be healed. St. Winifred was a beautiful maid, and the evil care dog desired her. He sought to seize her up against her will, but she was inspired by her love of God, and when she refused him, full of dread, he took up a sword and decapitated her. But then there was the miracle. Winifred's blood was crystal clear and flowed like a wave. The good earth opened, and the evil care dog was swallowed, unshriven, into the good earth. And Winifred's neck went back to her head, though she always had a scar. Or at least that's how the story's been told. And although she recovered, this magical spring comes forth clear and clean to the self same day. I will kneel by the shrine of the well and pray, for hunchback's life is a life of scorn. I've known more sorrow than tears could ever tell, and there are times when I simply wish I had never been born. But at St. Winifred Well, I will be healed.
My father died last winter. Also the chickens choked themselves, thrashed and turned sick after all that trouble I had plucking their grass and cleaning their muck and not one egg. What was I saying? My father died, lay down with fever, and at first I was glad. May God assoil me. He can't lift his hand, I thought, not while he's sick in the straw. Not to me, nor mother, nor wee Jack. But then he grew worse. Mog, says mother, you'll have to take the grain to the mill. So I took that great sack, but the mill wasn't turning. The kingpin was broken. I waited 8 hours, knee deep in slush, for them to grind my meal and give the Lord his share. That's the law. You must grind at the Lord's mill a day and a night. I waited, cursing under my breath until they fixed it, and they ground it and took their cut. I trod home, my shoes soaked and teeth chattering. By the time I got home, he was dead. I prayed for him. He wasn't a good man, always ale drunk. Mother can only see from one eye. He beat Jack and the lad as a half-wit. But he was strong and canny with his pennies. Somehow he saved up enough for a cow, our cow. We call her Paradise. A good red brindle, not 6 years old and strong enough to plow. Jack and I slept with her all last winter. Her body was warm and her dung patched the roof. Milk for the market and a calf for the spring. Paradise. Then mother tells me, the Lord has his rights. Harriet, they call it. When a man dies, the Lord has the right to the best beast he had. It's his right, she said, but I paid her no heed. Forsooth, I could have killed father for dying. He came early, a dapple gray horse and a ring on his finger, pinches his nose when he enters our hut and steers at our livestock fishy-eyed. I didn't say a word. I was staring at the cow in the straw. Not our cow, but Tam's, Tam Bywater's cow. Mangy, ribs showing and breathing like the bellows. A beast not worth the price of its hide. And mother, scraping and fawning. If you please, sir, begging your lordship's pardon. There's mother, so meek and blind in one eye, her shift full of holes and her hair falling out, making a fool of his lordship. So he took the best of the pigs. I would have chosen the same in his place. We curtsied, and mother kissed his hand, and we watched him ride off, and we waited till dark to take back Paradise.
lack-a-wit, numbskull, mooncalf, fool. That's what they call me. That's what they yell in the village when I walk through. I don't say back. I am waiting till I get big and can hit hard. My sister Mog says, don't listen to them. You're no fool. Can't you milk the cows and gather the eggs? And I can. I can milk as well as anyone. I can always find the eggs. More and Mog. I watch the hens. I see where they go. Father used to say I was good for nothing. But then Father died, and we don't miss him. Now it's just Moggy and me and Mother and the beast, which is good. Heaven must be like this. Jesus and his mother and the dumb beasts and angels fluttering around like birds. Nobody ale drunk. Nobody yelling or hitting or jeering lack-a-wit. Just friends. I have a friend. Moggy doesn't know. She hates him. Otho, the miller's son, she says he's a thief. But I never saw him steal. They hate him too. The other boys, when they see him, they whisper and snicker and throw rocks. One day last winter, I was hunting the eggs. He was under the hedge, crouched down and crying. His nose was all bloody, his eye turning black. He turned his back so I wouldn't see, but his shoulders were shaking so hard. I knew what to do because of Father. There was still ice under the tree. I clawed up a handful and laid it gently against his face. And I said what Mog always says. It'll get better. It'll get better. It will get better. He made a noise like a bull being slaughtered. And I cried too. I told him he can have my eggs, all 3. He didn't answer. Just kept making that noise, his mouth open just so he could breathe, his face all blood and tears and snot. I stayed by his side till he stopped. After that day, he's been my friend. He doesn't speak. He doesn't smile. He doesn't even move. But he's never forgotten and never joins in when the other boys shout, lack-a-wit, numbskull, mooncalf, fool.
My father fought in the Crusades with Richard the Lionheart. He told me tales, how he spitted Saracens upon his lance, cleaved them in twain, slashed open their skulls to save the holy city. My father also was a knight. We had to sell some of our land. We had land back then to pay for his weapons, armor, a horse. He came back a year ago, half starved, horseless, and on one leg. Ever since I was 4 or 5, I knew I'd be a knight. I could see myself, a brawny stallion between my knees, as I ride into battle. I would fight for widows and orphans, Christ and his church. I would be valiant, open-handed, frank, courteous. The soul of chivalry. I would ride into battle, slash, cut, left, right, sharpen my swords on the Saracens' throats, crush the bones of the heathen horde, all for the glory of our Lord. Except we have no money, and my mother says I have to be a monk, read Latin, and pray, scourge myself and sing at every mass, and cross myself 1,000 times a day.
cannot take this stain out of my gown. I have tried chicken feathers, water, urine, and ox gall, and still this mark. My father will be angry, a fine silk gown spoiled. But it's not my fault. I passed through the town on my way to the market, and somebody threw it. A clod of dung. I saw the boys, but I didn't know which. I was walking eyes down as a modest maid should. Then it hit me. I looked up and I saw them sniggering, hiding their smiles and their dirty hands. If I told my father, he would see that they all had a good beating to, and maybe I should. But I can't help but think. Only one threw the dung. Only one should be beat. But which? I cannot take the stain from my gown, or the thought from my mind. They hate me. Why? What have I done? With my own soft hands, I pass out bread on Lammas Day. From my own purse, I give to the poor. And in the time of war, those self-same boys would scurry like rats behind my father's walls. Yet it is true, I am better clad, better shod, and better fed than those churls. And what if I am? The Lord God chose my father to rule the same way he chose them to serve. I do but take what they would take if the Lord God chose them. I want to forget the way they laughed. Their smiles were so ugly. I almost feared. They were big boys and almost men. And I was alone, except for my maidservant Emot. Never mind, my lady, she says to me. But I do mind. My gown is spoilt. And never again will I walk through those streets with my eyes cast down.
I shouldn't have done it. I knew it was wrong when the muck left my hand. It was folly and cruelty, and I wish I hadn't. I was off to buy fish, and my stepmother said, "Take the twins." "Why?" said I. "Both of them? Bad enough with one. They're strong now, leaning their weight against my hand, dragging me in circles. I can only carry one. The other hauls at me. How should I manage the shopping?" "Just take them," she said, and burst into tears. "I want them out of the house. Just take them. You hear me? There'll be more come Christmas." "6 months," she said, and the tears rained down her face. "Another babe come Christmas." I stood there with my jaw almost touching my knees. More babies? There's the twins up and running. They don't sleep at night. They still puke out most of what you scoop into them. They shriek like hawks all day long. The cottage stinks like a midden. Babies, mess, everywhere. More babies? I wanted to scold, but my stepmother sank down in the rushes and wailed like a babe herself. It's worse for her than it is for me. Birthing the twins near killed her. So I took up my basket and snatched up the twins. One held my hand, the other on my hip. We set off for the market. It wasn't easy. The twin on the ground grabbed the fish from my basket and threw it. It landed by the water trough, and I had to wade through the mud to get it back. The twin on my hip seemed quiet enough till he started to bellow. I smelled something rank, and I felt it leaking down my dress. I couldn't staunch him. My hands were full. That's when I saw her. Isabel, the Lord's daughter, dressed in blue. Her hair was combed sleek as an otter. Her veil was snow white. She had a servant to carry her basket, so her hands were free to pinch up her skirt and pick her way through the muck daintily. Her lips were curved like the smile of a cat, and something got into me. Maybe 'twas the devil. I let go of the twin, picked up a handful of dung, filth, God knows what, and let it fly. Ooh, bullseye! But I didn't enjoy it. Not for more in the moment. Not after I saw her face. She hadn't done anything to me. And that smudge of the mud against her blue gown, oh, the prettiest dress I have ever seen. I ruined it. The boys in Shamble Lane laughed. They won't tell on me. They're my friends. I saw her eyes pass over me and on them. She thought they did it. I ought to have said something. I'm sorry. 'Twas my doing. But my little brother picked up something foul and mashed it in his mouth. By the time I got to him, pried open his jaws, fished it out, and bellowed, "No!" She plucked up her skirts to go. Her back was as straight as a knife, her head held proud. Poor girl. I was sorry, almost to weeping. On the way home, I went to church. I dragged the twins before the crucifix and knelt down and kept hold of the twins at the same time. It wasn't easy. I prayed that God would forgive me, that the muck would come out of her dress, that my stepmother wouldn't die. It made me think how all women are the same, silk or sackcloth, all the same. There are always babies to be born and suckled and wiped and worried over. Isabel, the Lord's daughter, will have to be married and scream with the pain and squat in the straw and pray for her life. Same as me. And thinking of that, I added one more prayer. Sweet Jesus, come Christmas, don't let it be twins.
I am Jacob ben Solomon, son of the Jew. I come to the stream to fetch the water. I avoid the well. In our old town, there was sickness, and they said that we poisoned the well. Why not? Why not blame the Jews? We paid the fine, 10,000 marks. For spittle and stone, curses and blows. But that, of course, wasn't enough. There is no such thing as enough. We had to go, pack our things, and our journey ended here, where different strangers, different Christians hate us, but they take our money. I came to the stream, and on the opposite bank was Petronella, the merchant's daughter.
I saw the Jew across the stream. My mother sent me for watercress. I saw him there, that Jew, the yellow badge sewn to his cloak, those staring eyes. I picked up a stone. My brother and I always throw stones at Jews, except when they practice their festivals, which the Pope has forbidden. God rest him.
I saw her stoop, pick up the stone.
He waited. Why? Why didn't he run?
I wouldn't run or shield my face. A girl's aim isn't much. I glared at her, furious.
Frightened.
I wouldn't flinch.
But he didn't run. I thank my God I am not a man. I am a maid and not a man who must hunt with a bow. If I were a man and saw in the wood white-feathered swan or soft-eyed doe, I could not shoot. I could not force my hand to let the arrow go.
I threw the stone, but not at me.
Over the water, skipping,
skimming,
swift and merry,
bouncing twice
over the water. He stared at me.
I picked up a stone and threw.
1, 2, 3, 4. 4 times it skipped. Bounced like a ball. I clapped my hands and saw him smile. He really wasn't like a Jew. He wasn't like a Jew at all.
We played there.
Happily.
Half an hour.
Cast our stones at the watercress stream.
They skipped.
Splashed.
Sank.
We laughed together.
Time flowed past us like a dream.
She was different from the others, though I know that can't be true. She was like a friend, a sister, not like a Christian, nor like a Jew. The bell tolled for Nonus. I remembered my basket, empty, my mother. What would she say if she knew I had wasted time alone in the woods with a Jew?
When I heard the bell, they seemed to say, she is a Christian, an enemy. I thought of my God. I thought of my people. I turned on my heel and walked away.
I stopped and plucked the watercress, and when I looked up, he was gone.
1/2 hour, I forgot, standing there in the water shoal, who he was. In my duty to God, I never told a living soul.
Father is a varlet, and the varlet serves the Lord. He feeds and takes care of the master's dogs, and he also takes a fair feed. I've helped clean the kennels, and I've held the puppies on my knees. I love dogs. But God's bones, the house is full of fleas. There's fleas in the potter's bowl, there's fleas in the bread, blood-sucking fleas, even in the blankets of our beds, nibbling at our buttocks in the back of our knees, delighting and biting. All throughout the night, those annoying fleas. My mother died when I was born, so it's my fault if the house has 10,000 fleas. It's my job to take care of the house. And when they're biting at us while we're asleep, and I've used bird time and turpentine enough to make anyone sneeze, alder leaves and lavender, but we still have those annoying fleas. Fleas with good appetites, somersaulting high, fleas that lead chases and they run down my thighs. They're fleas leading Herples. They're as strong as Hercules. The master raises hunting dogs, and we raise fleas. I'm proud of my father, and he cares for the dogs. He brings food for the table and dung for the thatch. Even when the winter's bad and others starve and freeze, we have porridge for the kennels. But we also have the fleas. I'm used to the lice, raising families in my hair. I expect moths and nibbles holes in everything I own. And I scrape away the maggots when they crawl across the food. I can get used to anything, except for the fleas. Fleas between my fingertips just waiting to be squashed. Fleas floating dead in the water where I wash. I itch in the cathedral, and upon my knees I pray, God, you saved us from damnation. Now please save us from the fleas.
I don't know when I ran away, but it was past Eastertide and before Lammas. Lammas to Michaelmas, and Michaelmas to Christmas. Christmas, Lent, and Easter. Oh, it must be nearly a year. Once I've lived in a town a year and a day, I'll be free. That's the law. The worst is over. This past winter, I don't know which was worst, the hunger or the cold, but I knew I would never go back. My father used to say he wished he'd run away when he was young and had no wife and children. Once there's mouths to feed, he'd say to me, you're a slave for life. You work till you drop down dead just to feed your children. But he never did feed us. It wasn't his fault. A villain only gets what the Lord lets him keep. And our Lord was tight-fisted. Then there was sickness, and my parents died, and I ran away. I wish I'd kept count of the days since I left. Once I'm free, I can start looking for work. Town work. The kind where you get money instead of old cabbage leaves and the dregs of beer. I'll get someone to teach me to make bread or rope. or meat pies. Oh, that'd be the best to work around food. Someday I'm gonna buy me one of those meat pies, one that's hot, and eat the whole thing all at once. And someday I'll buy new clothes. When winter comes, I'll have shoes on my feet instead of rags and straw. And when it's harvest time, I'll go to the fair and buy a blue ribbon for the girl who works up in the kennels. She was kind to me last winter. I'd been thieving and doing odd jobs, but the snow had been falling 3 days and everyone was within. There was nothing to steal and no work to be had. I took shelter in the kennel with the dogs. That's where she found me. She came in with the dog's food and the hounds jumped up, baying, and I huddled by the wall in the shadows. But she saw me. The dogs were round her barking, but she looked past them where I sat shivering. She came over, dipped her hand in the dog's bucket, and held out a handful of porridge. I was so hungry, I snatched her hand and gobbled, same as if I were a dog. I gulped down the dog's food and sucked her fingers, and she gave me more. And even as I was eating, I knew how queer it all was, but I didn't care. She was a stranger and stank of dog, but I licked her palm as though it was a golden plate. She let me stay till the weather thawed. I kept out of sight as best I could. From time to time, she gave me something to eat. She told me the names of the dogs. She loves the puppies best. Her hands were covered with tooth marks. She looks a bit like a pup herself. She has shaggy hair, and it hangs in her eyes and flops down to her shoulders like ears. Someday I'll go back. I'll wear new clothes, and I'll go to the kennels and tell her I'm free. Not a villain, not a vagabond, a free man. And I'll give her a piece of ribbon, blue as her eyes, so she can make herself pretty and tie back her hair.
None of our father's other apprentices ever won father's approval like Piers.
Father's taught many a boy to blow glass. We've had apprentices year after year, but Piers has the eye for it.
That's what our father says.
Piers has the lungs.
And he's hardworking too.
So father says Piers
Will inherit the business.
that is if he marries
One of us two.
Mary, God help us.
Piers never speaks to us.
Nose in the air and silent and rude.
Even at supper time, Piers doesn't talk.
He crouches down low like a dog at his food. Both of us hate him. Mary is older than me. If he marries my sister, he'll get the shop sooner, and I won't be ready for 5 or 6 years. But Mary is dear to me. How can I sacrifice her to that boy with the sticking out ears? How can our father be so tyrannical? Nobody in her right mind would want to marry Piers.
Maudie is younger. Probably Piers would rather have somebody younger than me. And Maud is so pretty, even though she is the one who put all of those slugs in his bed. Piers isn't bad looking, not when he's laughing. His hair is uncombed and his clothes are awry. He'd look a lot better if only he smiled. But Piers is an orphan. He's shy and he's proud.
If I have to wed Piers, I'll go out of my mind.
It's not that I like him, it's just that it's kinder.
The way that he scratches out the why he's Piers at what he scratched up.
And of course, more fine to treat him with
Earwax,
courtesy.
grime from his skin.
He's alone in the world, and I know that he's often been lonely.
He's lousy. His fingernails, ugh.
Sometimes when I watch him, I'm aware at a kind of a tug at my conscience. What if I befriended him, helped him mend to the burns on his fingers, and helped him mend his tunic, his fleas and his bedbugs? I know what would happen. My sister would tease.
And then there's his haircut, the shape of his head. He looks like a hedgehog. What made one in dread a marriage with one who's so churlish and tough? The matter of the truth
I'm not brave enough.
is that father is thinking
I'm constantly shrinking.
Of business and profit, of shillings and pence.
I should have more courage and follow my conscience. However Maud teases, I should have more sense.
He ought to be thinking about his poor daughters. Why must we submit like lambs to the slaughter?
I ought to tell Maud we should both be silent.
Must Marriott be wed just because Pierce has good lungs?
I must find a way to follow my conscience.
I must find a way to change father's mind.
Of course I'm too young to be thinking of marriage. My only thought is to treat him decently. To marry a man
There's no time to be lost.
is a matter of weight.
If I have to accost him, I'm going to tell father we simply hate Pierce. I'll go down on my knees. I'll say please. I'll shed tears.
You share your whole life,
I am willing to beg.
your children, your work days,
I'd rather have plague.
your sorrows, your pleasures, your ale and your bread,
I'd rather have leprosy.
even your bed. I must think over clearly what father has said. If I have to be wed, well, then when all's said and done,
I would rather be dead than
I'll wed Piers.
I was born lucky. Nay, not born lucky, as you shall hear, but lucky soon after and ever after. My father and mother were starving poor and dreaded another mouth to feed. When my father saw I was a girl child, he took me up to drown me in a bucket of water. But here's the lucky part. And 'tis pursuit, I didn't drown. Babe though I was, I took hold of my wee fingers and held to the side of the bucket. And my mother wept, and my father's heart went soft. He could no longer drown me more than he could drown himself. And they named me Nellie for Queen Eleanor, and their luck changed. First, my uncle died of the scurvy, and we got his pigs. Then the nuns at the abbey hired us to catch eels, and we've been sniggling ever since. Do you see these eels? Fresher than the day they were born, and fat as priests. I know where their barrows are, and I know what they like for bait. And as for frogs, there's not a frog in Christendom jumps fast enough to get away from me. And I can swim as fast as any boy, and better than Drago, the tanner. Do you know Drago, the tanner's apprentice? I can't point him out to you, because then he'd see me. He's always staring at me. Many's a time I've seen him peel off his hose to show me his legs, as if every frog I've ever put into a pie didn't have better legs than his. We had a brawl last summer. I said 'twas the fault of the tanners that the river stank, and he said 'twas the fishmongers, which is pure folly. 'Tis surely God's will that fish should rot in the water, but the bees should rot on the land. I put out my tongue, and by St. Peter, he pushed me right off the wharf into the water. And then, poor fool, thought I would drown, who couldn't even drown when I was 3 hours old. He splashed in after me, and I dove down deep and grabbed him by the foot. And I ducked him 3 times, and served him right. Only then I had to drag him out of the water, because it turns out he can't even swim. So I suppose you could say I saved his life. He's never forgotten it. He watches me all the time and shows off his legs. But I don't speak to him. I want nothing to do with him and his legs. I pretend I don't even know his name. And every day I walk past the tannery just so he can see me not looking his way.
I don't mind the stink. I grew up with it, being the son of a butcher. Dead things stink. That's the will of God. And tanners make good money. I don't mind the work, digging the pits, grinding the oak bark, smearing the hides with dung. Work is work. I like bread in my belly and ale in my cup. I do mind the jeering of Nellie the Sniggler. Her tongue could scrape the hair off a hide. And I mind the townsmen nattering on, saying that we foul the waters. By Saint Bartholomew, thinkest thou man could make leather without filth? Alum, lime, oak galls, urine, ashes, tallow, and stale beer. These are the tools of my trade. Would you warm your hands in leather gloves? Saddle or bridle your horse? Do you dance to the sound of the bagpipes or lace up the cords of your armor? What about the bellows heating the forge? It's leather, stinking leather. Do you want good shoes or don't you? So be it. Now, let me get on with my scraper and dung. You hold your nostrils and hold your tongue.
Good masters, sweet ladies. I am Giles the beggar, the best of my trade. Behold my crushed foot, the sight of which would sicken thy stomachs and soften thy hearts. A penny, a shilling, I grovel for mercy. Sometimes I even manage real tears. It's an art.
No takers, no givers, not even a morsel. They are stoned to my pitiful cries, and so I am left to my wits, which in fact are prodigiously keen and surpassingly wise. I enter a town with my crutch and my cry, food for the famished, alms for the poor. I stagger and collapse in the dust of the road. I swoon, too exhausted to go one step more. And here comes my father, but I do not know him. I lie by the roadside, starting to wail.
My fodler, the peddler, the dealer in relics, 10 pence for a thread from St. Margaret's Vale, who covets the thumbnail of Martin of Tours, or this, better still, even this can be yours. A flask of the healing holy water. Stand back now. Don't push. Don't jostle. Used on the feet of St. James Apostle. Sometimes they pay. More often they don't. So he throws up his hands and he sighs. Like that. Oh, ye of no faith, before you I swear I will cure here and now this unfortunate brat.
That's my cue, so I whimper. He opens the flask, anoints me while I seem to faint. The authentic holy water used on the feet of the holy saint. I swoon in his arms, look upward, cry out. Angels, apostles, I see them before me. Now, see how the peasants step forward and gawk. I throw down my crutch, clasp my hands, and I walk. My father and I rehearse this for hours. Miracles have to look perfectly natural. He walks, praise God and his saints, he walks.
If I do it just right.
The crowd gasps aloud.